Hi, I was asked if I would make this video on how I made this prayer bead bracelet. So it's basically just your regular set of Protestant prayer beads that includes the resurrection stone and has an added decorative clasp on it so you can actually wear it as a bracelet because a lot of times they're just so pretty you want to be able to show them off. So I'm going to show you how I did this. I found a very pretty cross, and then I found this little heart and banana shape, I guess you could say, clasp um, that is in a similar metal to my cross. So you want something that's going to match and look like it should be there. So in this case, I used this, and I found all the supplies I used for these bracelets at Joann's. So I just hooked that right to the top of the cross, the jump ring. You're also going to want a little crimp bead. It's just itty bitty little gold crimp bead. Don't lose it. Some scissors. And I like these needle nose pliers and then some sort of flat pliers. A couple T-pins are always handy. And then you're going to want some beading thread and a beading needle. And this was what I could find the day I decided to do it. So it's a little bit finer, and I double stranded this. I have a length that goes from my hand to my elbow. Maybe add just a little bit because it worked for what I was doing, but an extra inch would have been nice when I was tying the knot at the very end of this. I was just a tiny bit short. So, but approximately from your hand to your elbow, maybe a little bit more. And these are the beads that I chose. So you're going to want your 5 large stones, your 26, I believe, your weak stones, and then some seed beads, your resurrection stone, and um, I just to add extra length to this, I added a couple extra uh, neutral decorative beads so that they just kind of added that extra length so that it would work as a bracelet. So depending on the size of your beads, you might need the extra, you might not. So this is a double strand, and we're going to be starting at the cross, and when we're done, coming back towards the cross again. So it's very similar to other ways you've probably already seen to do your prayer beads. We're just adding a little extra to it, and I'm using the regular thread instead of flex twine. So I started with the seed bead, and then a little decorative bead I had, and another seed bead. So we've got a knot at the end, and seed bead, decorative bead, seed bead. Okay, so now we want to do the cross. So I went not into the jump ring, I went into the base of the cross so it wouldn't pull out. So the ring on the cross itself. And now we're going to go back through all 3 of those beads. So seed bead, decorative bead, seed bead. So now you're going to start your regular round of beads. I had another decorative bead, but then you're going to do your invitatory bead. your seed beads, your resurrection bead if you use that. And my seed beads kept going inside of the hole of my other beads, so I had to stop and poke it out. Not that that's going to stop it from going back into it again, but I still did it. So there's my resurrection bead. Another seed bead. Another invitatory bead, except for I realized I was using the wrong beads. The green beads are the ones I am using for my weak beads. This is my invitatory bead. Now my seed bead and the resurrection bead. And the seed bead stuck in that bead again. There we go. Seed bead, invitatory bead. Actually, at this point, no. I did some more decorative beads right here because again, I was just trying to add that extra little bit of length to make it a good size to create the bracelet. So now we're gonna start the circle itself, and we're going to add the little crimp bead onto here. Right there's the little crimp bead, and we're going to put that on, but do not crimp it yet because we need to go back through it later. So there's your little crimp bead. Now we're going to work around doing our sets of beads. Okay, so the second green bead's actually the one of the first cruciform bead. Now we're going to work around the grouping, just following your regular pattern of cruciform beads and your 7 beads for the week, days of the week, and the seed beads in between each. So it's 7 days of the week bead, 1 cruciform bead, 7 days of the week bead, 1 cruciform bead, with the seed beads in between each one. And that's what goes all the way around, except that we will make one exception just before the technically the third cruciform bead, but it's the second in the circle itself. I could have sped this up here, but I figured I'd just leave it going at the speed it is in case you're working along with me. Then it's going at a better pace for what you're actually doing. Seed beads are hiding inside of my beads again. I think I just need to give up on trying to keep them separated. So now I did another decorative bead near each of my cruciform beads, again because I was wanting to create that extra length that I figured I needed for my bracelet. Um, when it's all said and done, I probably could have left a couple of those out, maybe one of the ones at the very beginning, but I did need some of that extra length. But some beads are just larger than others, so you just have to kind of play around and see what you're going to need to create that space that you need for it to actually wrap around your wrist. If you look at the other one above it, I do have, I think I put one extra bead. No, I put two extra beads on that one right by the cross. But that was all that I had to add on that one. But the weak beads on that one were a little bit wider than the weak beads on the green one. I don't know why I ended up with so much camera shake in this video. Sorry about that. I must have been bumping it with the board I'm working on. Okay, so I've got the 7 weak beads on now. And so for this one, I end up adding, I think, 2 or, okay, I did the decorative bead. I forgot about that. And then a seed bead. Okay, and now you're going to put on your other end of your clasp, whatever type of clasp you decided to use. Put that there. And then I put 2 seed beads because I was trying to create a little bit of extra narrow space next to this clasp because of the type of clasp it is. Because when it needs to go through the heart, if it's too close to the cruciform bead, it's the cruciform bead's too big to allow it to go through the heart. So that's why I put those couple other seed beads in there. And you don't really notice it, but it just gives that extra little bit of space. And now we're just going to finish working around with our other cruciform beads and weak beads, just like we have previously, till we get to the end and are ready to finish it off. Now, when you're completely done with this, if you want to, you can add just a tiny dot of super glue onto your knots just to help to keep them from untying. You do not have to, and especially if you are able to leave any bit of tail, you definitely wouldn't have to. But I actually did because I didn't want to take a chance of mine coming untied, so I put a dot of super glue on it. Just make sure you don't glue your finger to the beads. Yeah, done that before. Okay, so we're almost to the end here. Make sure and double count all your beads um, after you've done it. Literally count each one to make sure that you haven't forgotten, that was a word, forgotten one. I actually did that one time and ended up with 6 in one spot. So make sure, count it again, double check it, make sure all your beads are there. And once they are, which mine almost are, then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, the last seed bead. Okay, so now you should have all your beads on. And you're going to go back to that little tiny crimp bead that we put on earlier. Separate it just enough so you can get in there, go through the crimp bead, go through a few of your other beads to a spot that feels comfortable for you. You're going to be making a knot, so make sure the knot's in a place where you think it'll look okay. Which you do have a knot down at the beginning from where we started. And that's something to think about when you're choosing what type of thread or whatever that you're using, is that some of that will be seen within your knot or where it loops around your cross. Okay, so we have it all the way through now. And here's my handy little pliers. I use these tiny little needle nose pliers first. Make sure your thread's pulled really nice and tight. Then I use the little tiny needle nose pliers to start my squeeze, but have found from experience that you do not bank on just that squeeze, because you can't quite get these things tight enough that way. So I'm actually trying to pull the thread here a little bit with the pliers to get it really nice and tight. Okay, so get that on there. Get a good squeeze going onto it once you can grab it. You don't want to break your other beads either. Okay, now with your other hand, use the other pliers. Go over the end of those needle nose pliers. And then crimp down on both of them at the same time, giving them a really nice, good, hard squeeze. That's going to give extra pressure on the tips of those and should make your beads nice and tight. Before you tie knots or cut or anything, double check that it's not going to pull out. So now, like I said at the beginning, I made my strand just ever so slightly too short. If it was long enough, I could have tied this knot with the needle on it. But because it's too short, I needed to cut it. And now I've got to try and get this knot in here with such a tiny space. And it's a little bit tricky. So I'm trying to use the pliers so I could grab the end, the tail. Didn't quite work well. I give it a good try though. I try a couple times and then decide to pull out some tweezers, see if I could do that. I really should have gotten some of my other tweezers that have even a tinier tip, but I was determined to do with what I had right there. So if you have made that initial string long enough, you should not have this problem. Actually, when I did the other one, I had an extra long tail I cut off, which is why I think I ended up cutting this one so short. Is I'm like, oh, I don't need that much. Yeah, I should have left it a little bit longer. So, and the overhand knot is a little bit better on this, I think, than doing a basic knot. So that's why I'm determined to do that. So sorry you have to watch me struggle through this knot. This is what you do not do. Crochet hook now. Let's see if that will work. I can't remember which trick ends up working. I think I end up going back to the tweezers. I'm like, I know I can get a little bit more thread out of you. Okay, so now if you stick the T-pin in and you pull the end of your thread, you can push with the T-pin and get your knot right up against your bead, which is another reason why I like that kind of knot. You can get it right up by the bead. So now if I had tied this with the needle still attached, if I had had a longer tail, then I could have threaded that tail through a couple beads and definitely wouldn't have had to worry about gluing it. But because I did have such a tiny short tail, I had to cut it right against the knot. So that's another reason why I ended up putting a dot of super glue on it. But there you go. I hope this helped, and